Have you ever wondered what it'd be like if the spirit of a dead grandma possessed you and stole your junk? No? Wait, really? I thought that was a perfectly normal thing to ask. Like, what happens after we die, or what is sound made out of? Wait, sound isn't made out of anything? What about light? Wait, Jim? Jim? Jim, don't leave me, Jim! Well, it sounds about as goofy as me saying I'm not a weeb. This is actually the premise to DANDADAN, and it's not as bad as you might think. The first thing I want to talk about in regards to this anime is actually the style. I think the style is DANDADAN's main claim to fame, and generally speaking, I think it works better in the anime because primarily color. And then I think animation also helps emphasize certain stylized elements of the show, like 4-point and 5-point perspective, which, if you don't know what those are, that's basically like fisheye lens, which is used a lot in both the anime and the manga. And I just want to say, too, though, huge props to both the anime and the manga for having that, because 5-point perspective and 4-point perspective are pretty difficult, not used very often. But yeah, I think generally I do prefer the anime as opposed to the manga because of that. I did actually read ahead a little bit in the manga. I'm a little bit past season 1 ends, and it's a little strange because season 1 ends like in the middle of an arc, like on a cliffhanger, which I guess kind of makes sense for anime being what anime is. I don't feel like there's ever really any like kind of conclusion at the end of a season and then things pick back up different the next season. I mean, sometimes there is, but it's not uncommon for that not to be the case. So one of the big things that a lot of shonen generally focuses on is action, and I find it interesting that this show doesn't actually focus nearly as much on action as it does things like romance. The action is good. I don't think it's. I think it's par for the medium at this current point in time. It's nothing like standard is above average, and this is on par with standard, I think. As for the romance, this is like borderline a romance anime disguised as a shonen. There's such a heavy focus on romance, and it's kind of strange too, because it kind of like tries to play it off, it feels like, as just two friends having awkward interactions with each other, but it's like so obviously romance. And I think like later on in the manga, like probably the equivalent of 2 or 3 seasons in, it does actually become explicitly romance, but it's like it's so obviously romance, and it, for some reason, it's trying to, the characters are trying to say it's not, or whatever, but I don't know if it's actually trying to play it off as not being romance, or if it's the characters out of it being in denial, which, if it's the latter, that makes sense. I think that's good writing, and that's probably what it is, frankly. But yeah, I saw somewhere online where a shoujo enjoyer, which is basically the kind of romance focused area of, or like demographic of anime. So I saw from somewhere online from a shoujo enjoyer that the romance is actually pretty good in this show. So hey, coming from a shoujo enjoyer, it's probably the case. I don't really watch much anime. The only, or no, I'm a weeb. I watch tons of anime. I don't really watch much romance anime. I think I've seen like one that I haven't finished yet, and the only one I can think that I plan to watch is Kaguya-sama Love is War, which is like half romance, half comedy. So I can't really attest to whether the romance is good or bad. I think it's pretty well done. It's I it's good. I think it's definitely way better than other shonen. Like, thinking about some of the shonen I've seen, or at least seen parts of, Demon Slayer, actually show my hands. Demon Slayer, romance, non-existent. Full Metal Alchemist, uh, there's a tiny bit there, but it's not very well written. JJK, I've only seen the first season, but I don't think it's really there at all. The list goes on. There's like not any good romance in shonen anime, so I feel like this does it well. There's also uh the mangaka, the guy making the manga, the comic, is playing around with the idea of a female protagonist, which I find really interesting too. And it's a little confusing because the second main character, the deuteragonist, is Okarun, and he can so easily be confused, I feel like, for the main character. Like, I straight up thought he was the main character until I saw like a forum post online or something that was saying how like the mangaka, the author, actually came out and said straight up that Ayase, the female main character, is like the main character, and Okarun isn't actually the main character. And so I find it interesting that it's kind of playing around with that concept for a medium that is generally focused on the demographic of like teenage guys, which I do kind of feel like at this point in the anime, the characters, while being generally well written, I feel like they are a little shallow. I feel like the focus is more on other aspects of the show or of the story, like school life and getting Okarun's balls back. And speaking of getting Okarun's balls back, this show has such a strange mix of humor and like serious matter and serious story elements and just story. I feel like I'm fine. I feel like it's, well, the premise is pretty whack. Like, literally, Okarun gets possessed by a dead grandma spirit, and she steals his balls and like supernaturally, and like loses them to aliens and yokai or whatever. So even while that is a super wacky and like crazy premise, it is like a serious story, and I feel like it's mostly just portrayed very it's portrayed with a lot of shonen-esque humor, I feel like. And there's honestly, man, there's a lot of it, like the humor. There's a huge focus on that, and of course the anime. So help me, I keep replacing every word with anime. That and the romance. God, the romance and the romance and the shonen humor. Yeah, that. But yeah, I feel like too it knows when to try to make humor and when to not, and just focus on having a serious story and telling that story. Because like around episode 6, there is a specific little like subplot, sub-story that just like hits hard, man. It's just like you just start crying unless you're a sociopath, and you're just like, where the crap did that come from? I thought this was just a comedy shonen thing. And it's like, it's kind of jarring, but my point is, I feel like it knows when to be serious and when to be comedic, generally speaking. And one and two, it's like, it's definitely toned down from Deadpool, because I think I compared it to Deadpool, the humor with the like serious story and comedic portrayal. It's like, yeah, it's very like serious story with a very comedic representation of the story. I feel like that's what Deadpool kind of did, and I feel like that's what this does in a similar way. Like the premise is very, like, it sounds like it's just a spoof, but it's not. Like, it's definitely toned down a lot because of the target demographic being a bit younger. So it's definitely not as explicit, which too I find really interesting because it does explore a lot of themes of SA and somehow is pretty inexplicit with a lot of that exploration of those like themes. So I feel like it has a pretty good portrayal of those themes too. Like, it doesn't, well, it is still very stylized and comedic and has all the fantasy elements of like supernatural abilities and stuff. It doesn't really, I feel like, cross the line into being disrespectful or having an immoral portrayal of those themes. It's just, I find it really interesting how it's such an inexplicit exploration of those themes, because it's such a like dark and explicit topic. And yeah, the soundtrack or the score, I don't know if score is the right word, but it's not. Soundtrack, whatever, is soundtrack is a banger. Odanoke is a great song, and then generally the music throughout the show. There's one specific background song that I find so hype. But yeah, it's not anything, of course, I'd listen to outside of the show, but it is good. I like the soundtrack music. And I just want to talk about, too, a general complaint I have with a lot of shonen that DANDADAN is definitely guilty of. I feel like it over-explains things to an unnecessary degree. Like, it'll kind of portray something about the world and like the leveling systems or whatever. You know, like in this world, they're yokai, so basically like spirits or ghosts or demons. And then they're like aliens, and it'll like give you enough to where you can infer some things about the world and like figure out about, you know, the yokai and the aliens and stuff. But then after it does that, it'll explain it to you directly with words from like with verbal words from like a character that just knows or something, or is just making a guess. And like, it's like, I don't need it to be explained to me like you're reading it out of a history book or something, or like a Webster's definition of how the world in this anime works. Like, it's too much. It doesn't need to be explained like that. But yeah, definitely worth the watch if you want a kind of goofier, stylized, romance-ish anime that will probably make you cry and might just maybe make you laugh a little bit if you have even a hint of a 14-year-old's humor left in your system. But yeah, on the Goober score, I'm going to give that a 6.5 out of 10. Also, sorry for my voice. I've been kind of sick lately, so I've got a lot of congestion up in my nose, so my voice isn't as nice as normal, I guess, if you think I have a wonderful, amazing, beautiful voice, because I do. But yeah, I'm also gonna try to start doing a song of the video. So the song for today is Undercover Martin by Two Doors Cinema Club. Yeah, good song. Go check that out. And I'm gonna go eat some ramen to hopefully clear this up, something like that. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed. Maybe watch something else. Yada, 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 all that stuff. Anyway, I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye, Johnny.